Welcome to the show, Mind Matters. This is the podcast for love, life, and learning where your mind matters. I'm your host, Nate Shear, and today we'll be talking about the contracting career field 6C0. So I'd like to introduce our two guests, Matt Gill and Trent Beavers. Say hi.
How's it going, everyone?
Okay, so what is the AFSC and what is the official title?
The AFSC
You're gonna have to take.
all right. 6 Charlie 0 X1, and it's contracting.
Perfect. So this is for both of you. How did you find it or become interested in this field?
I'll lead with my story. So I found contracting by complete accident. I started out in the Air Force as satellite communications. Around my 9-year mark, I was like, I don't want to. I like what I'm doing. I don't necessarily want to do this. So I don't see myself retiring. So I put all the cool jobs on I was qualified for, like TACP, Intel, all the EOD, because I had a top secret clearance. I had class 3 flight physical. I qualified for everything and passed all the initial tests. And there's this thing called a fiscal year, which I had no idea what that was. And put my application in. They said, hey, there's no slots left for any of these classes. You have to try when the fiscal year rolls over 1 October. Like, don't know what that means, but 1 October marked. So again, I put all the chronic, at the time it was called the chronic critical career field shortage list. And I just listed, I think contracting was like number 3. I don't remember what I put on there, but it wasn't high up there. Last date 5 days later. I was like,
wow,
what is this? I need to do some research and figure out what this is. And
did you have a resource or ability to find out more information, or did you just go in blind?
I pretty much went in blind. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what a contracting squadron was. And when I got into tech school, it was just like completely new world. But I'd say the contracting career field is largely academia kind of focused, if you will. It's very so it's easy material to pick up. It's not difficult to pick up some of the foundations that you learn when you go through your school.
But applying it.
That's the difficult part. And that's how I came to contracting, and here it's now 13 years-ish later, I'm still doing it.
That's awesome. Okay, Beavers, how'd you stumble across it?
Mine was a little different. So I didn't have a job heading into the Air Force. I came in open general, and I didn't really care what job I got. I just said, let me in the Air Force, and went to basic training. Didn't have a job. And week 6, they sat all of us down and said, here's a list of open jobs, rank them in order that you would want. And my top 4 were intel, geospatial intelligence jobs, and things like that. And I had to choose 7. So my last 3, I just spitballed whichever ones I thought of in this packet of jobs available. And everyone was telling me, oh, you're open general, you're going to get security forces, you're going to be a cop, whatever. And the next week, we all got our jobs, and everyone in my flight but me got security forces, and I got contracting. And I think it's down to either your ASVAB score, or I had college credits already. I'd gone and gotten my associate's degree prior to joining. So that might have played into a role, and I had no idea what contracting was. I thought I was going to be wearing a hard hat making buildings, which I didn't want to do. And turns out I was completely wrong. So that's how I stumbled into it. And been in 10 years so far and love it. So
That's crazy, all the things that happened to you at basic training. I remember I came in guaranteed air traffic. I was told I could go overseas and see the world. And like one of the large portions of my pros and cons list for joining the Air Force is to travel. And so I was so excited to be able to get out and go overseas. And then I think what kind of reminded me of it is you said week 6. I think it was week 6. They came around to us and they're like, too many people wash out of air traffic. We're not going to bother sending anybody overseas anymore. So please do a new list. I was like, no, I wanted to go overseas. So That was kind of a letdown there. Week 6. Perfect. Well, we're going to move into asking both you guys kind of your origin story. So, kind of how long you did it, what you did, and kind of give us a brief synopsis as kind of the foundation as we hear more about more from you. So, anyone want to kick it off first?
You
Yeah.
want us to do prior to the military or once we got in the military up till now?
Once you got in, kind of what you did in contracting.
Gotcha. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah. So I retired 2020. Like I said, I did 20 years in the Air Force. I started out satellite communications. Did, that was roughly around that time, 2003. The World Trade Center, all the wars started kicking off, starting to get deployed. And I didn't mind it, to me, it was fun. But like I said, around that 9-year mark, I realized I need to do something different. I need to have a career that I can focus on and know that by the time I retire, I'll be considered in that 10-year window that you're kind of like looked at as kind of like close to being an expert, right? I think that's kind of what they say is around 10 years you're getting close to being an expert in your field. Around, right now I'm at about 14 years I'm considered a subject matter expert. That's kind of, if you will. And so yeah, the Air Force, it took me all over the world. I ended up deploying even more in contracting. That backfired into more austere places.
Yeah.
But I will say that those experiences and the challenges that you face in contracting specifically is good because it challenges you. The career field will challenge you in overseas locations and to come up with creative solutions dealing with very unique problems that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And when you do decide to retire or separate and enter the civilian workforce, you have an advantage over other applicants because one, you've been trained. Everyone has like a baseline, right? The baseline being tech school. Everyone's graduated tech school. Then everyone's done their 5-level, 7-level upgrades training. Then they have their APDP level 1. I'm sure that's changed now. Level 2, most people have. Like, Beavers, you said you had an associate's walking in. You probably have a bachelor's degree now. I guess you probably finished that. Most people are finishing bachelor's and master's degrees. So
So
that's
a lot
kind
of good
of the
opportunities.
story.
Can you highlight some of the places? I mean, without going a list of 30 different countries, but what are some of the highlights of places you've been?
Yeah, I've been Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, Oman, Turkey, and all throughout Eastern Europe.
That's awesome. Okay, Beavers, what's your story? How long you been in? What have you done?
I've been in, I just hit my 10-year mark at the end of July. I reenlisted back in last December. So I plan to do 20. I came in only thinking I was going to do 4 or 6 back in 2013 and then fell in love with the Air Force and the career field, even though, like you, I wanted to go overseas, but it got stationed in the middle of North Dakota at Minot Air Force Base in the ice freezing cold out there
Mm.
with a job I had no idea anything about. So it's been a fun experience. I've deployed 3 times in 9 years and been many bases, been to Turkey after Minot, then went to England, been deployed to Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and then I went to Kosovo. Just got back last month. So you will definitely deploy in this career field more than you probably expect. And I'm planning to go to Schriever Space Force Base in January with my family. So back to the States, and then yeah, we'll see what goes on from there. But love the job, love the Air Force so far.
Awesome. A lot of different places you can go. Everyone needs contracting. So the first
Yes.
main question to kick us off, this is always kind of a difficult one to really wrap up, but can you give us an overview of your career field? Not the Google version, but what it looks like every day. I mean, every day is different, a lot of meetings and things going on, but in, your elevator speech, if someone caught you, could you describe it in like 3 minutes without saying, I'm not a contractor?
My wife calls me a glorified shopper.
Hmm.
So I would
Uh,
say to most people, what I do is the Air Force goes to many different places, but we don't take everything we need with us. We have to get it from wherever we're going. So I'm the guy that goes out to try to find things in the local area, local marketplace to support our mission needs. So,
It's pretty good.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that summed it up better than I could have. I have to admit.
Yeah, I used to say just, trying to piece together cutting the contract between the contractor and the government, that link between the two, because I feel like that is where the line usually gets
Yeah.
blurred. So that's usually what I try to say. Like I'm the one in the middle that, actually writes that and cuts that across. So that's
Because
good though. I
sometimes I'm
like that.
swiping a credit card, sometimes I'm writing a full on contract. So it's
Standard
just
Form 44, right? You got to
varies.
get that checkbook
Yeah,
going.
SF-44s did those. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, just as a general life lesson, what's one lesson you've learned in life you believe everyone should know and take to heart? Doesn't have to be contracting related, but we're always working on ourselves here, so a little personal development.
I I'd say the biggest thing is, and I was just talking about this today with somebody, and I think one of the biggest things I learned from when I was in was, when you're on a deployment, and I was telling the wife this earlier, I was like, none of my deployments ever went as I thought they would go. Oh, you're going to be out there 180 days, and you'll be back by then. No, it always ran off. It was like 200. It would just drag on, and part of that, when you get that crushing news, like the first time when I was single, it didn't matter. When I was married, it was not a big deal. I'm just like, whatever. Okay, I'll stay out, get more tax-free money. It's great. Let's do this. Let's rock and roll. But life happens. You get into relationships. You have friends. You got family back home, and you start missing those things as you get older. Um, and when I would get that news as I got older, it would be kind of soul crushing. And it's how do you mentally, you have to develop the resilience to be able to take hard news like that and start to look forward. What's the future path? What's the end goal that you're trying to get to? Okay, so you're delayed a little bit. This is going to happen. It's going to happen driving home from work. You're going to hit traffic. You're going to be delayed. It's annoying, but at the end of the day, you're going to be at home, right?
Yeah,
Same kind of thing. It's a little bit different, but I think learning those different tools of resiliency while I was it helped, especially tackling smaller problems, if you will. I'd say
absolutely.
so. Yeah, I'd say the main takeaway from that is really like look at the end objective of what you're trying to get to, the path to get there. If you look at any successful CEO or leader, they're going to tell you about all the failures they had to get to where they were today, and that's exactly kind of the same thing. You just look at that end goal. And yeah, maybe Monday's hard, Tuesday's terrible, Wednesday's great, Thursday's there, but guess what? Friday's 2 days away, 3 days away. We're all going to hit Friday, right?
Yeah, and I think another thing that's really important to touch on that is like the bigger picture, right? Like everybody wants to go home. If you leave, then someone else is going to have to leave early, and so if you start to think of the other aspects of it outside of ourselves, I think the initial thing is kind of to dive into ourselves, right? There's other people that would have to replace you, and they'd miss their family, and a string of other things. So kind of thinking of the bigger picture. But I love that you touched on the resiliency because I think some of the things that have happened in my life, the things that I've built up and experienced throughout my Air Force time has actually really prepared me. And I know we use resiliency, and sometimes it's a little frustrating because it seems like it's almost a buzzword. It just gets thrown around all the time. But I think what you touched on is the most important. Resiliency isn't a buzzword or a commander's call or a word on a slide. It's the ability to get through it and then look back. I feel like we don't do that. We want things to be easy and just want to get the resiliency for free. Like resiliency doesn't come from the easy. Resiliency comes from the difficult. You conquer it, and then you get to look back and, oh, I did that. That was fine. It was another 30 days. It sucked. But I got through it. I got home. I'm healthy. I'm safe. I didn't get blown up. There's a lot of different things that you could look through that. But I feel like for some reason, resiliency now seems like, well, I just want it to show up on social media and everything looks great. And I only take pictures on the good days and things like that. So that's a good point. Like resiliency, but like true resiliency, getting through the difficult and knowing that you can. So that's awesome. Beavers,
Yeah,
what's your one
and
takeaway? Oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, like, I do agree with you. When I was leaving the Air Force, that was like, I think that word and that term was overused. And when you overuse a word or a term, it starts to lose its importance and its value. And I
Hmm.
think you hit it on the head. I think out of the two of you, I'm the one I can say this, but yeah, it became the buzzword. And whenever someone said, "All right, resiliency training," everyone's like, "Oh, here we go. All right, let's check this box, guys. Let's get on with our day." But it is
Yeah,
an
which is
important thing to
unfortunate.
learn. It is an important kind of lesson
Yeah, get through
that
those
needs to be
difficult
done.
times and know that you can. You don't rack those up. In one of a previous episode, I'd never heard the analogy, but someone on the show had said her person that was working through some stuff with her referenced it as a paper plate, which I thought was kind of cool. If you just have the one wimpy plate and they put a big stack of spaghetti, that spaghetti is just going straight on the floor. But you
Yeah.
have been through some things, you've conquered some things. You now have like 4 or 5 paper plates. You put the spaghetti, it holds, and then you just build up more and more. But we use the rubber band, but I don't really ever understand. Oh, bounce back! Like, what does that mean? The paper plate I thought was way better than the rubber band. But anyway,
Yeah.
Beavers, what do you got? One
Something
takeaway.
something that yeah, one takeaway that you can use just not in the military, not in contracting, but everywhere is you really do reap what you sow. The more time you prepare, the more you're going to be better wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you take the time to practice, to study, to research, to read, away from unproductive time, you're going to see the back end productivity. So in contracting, if you're reading the FAR, you're studying, you're planning for a deployment, you're researching the country where you're going instead of just winging it and getting there. It's completely different. So to me, it's take the time that you need to do to accomplish whatever you're trying to do, and I can't overstress that enough.
Yeah, that's a good one. Somebody was talking about, I forgot who it was, but they were talking about being nervous for like a presentation. And you kind of have two things for that nerves. One, you're nervous because you care about it and you want to do really well. Or the other one, you're nervous because you didn't prepare. And the outcome of
Yep.
those are
Yep.
completely different. If you care, you put the time in, you research, you're
Hmm.
nervous, your heart is racing, but you crush
Yeah,
the
you're more
presentation.
anxious than worried.
Yeah. The other
Yeah.
one, like Simon Sinek talks about it. He, interviewed some people that were up for the Olympics and then some people that were doing a presentation. And he asked them, how they were feeling, and they had sweaty palms and racing heart, and they had these different symptoms. They had exactly the same symptoms. He asked the person for the job interview, and the word they used to describe how they were feeling was nervous. But the Olympics, they had the exact same symptoms, but the word they used to describe themselves was excited because they were excited to
There
prove
you go.
themselves. They've worked their whole life. Like the nerves are no longer there. They have the same symptoms physiologically, but they're excited. This is the biggest stage. This is what I've
Exactly.
worked for my whole life. I'm going to crush this. So it's interesting,
Yeah, you
just
ask some people
the
that
frame of mind.
are about to deploy, and people have said, "Oh, are you nervous? What are you?" And you can either say, "Oh, I'm excited to deploy. I've been waiting for since I joined to do my mission, to everything." And then some people are like, "Oh, I'm nervous to go out there, and I'm scared of being alone." And it's just, yeah, two different things for sure.
Yeah, my first contracting deployment, like everything I had been told, they said, "Hey, they're going to hand that phone to you." And in Oman, we were 3D, and they handed that phone, and that reality hit. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing and what I got myself into. And they're like, "Look through all these files," and I'm like furiously trying to read, but the major that was our commander, he was like, "Just wait for the phone to ring, go from there." And I was like sweating and just like, "Hello." So yeah,
Oh, yeah. You definitely have two ends of the spectrum there. So we'll move on to another question. Again, it's a little difficult because days just look so different. But from your experience, I'd like to hear from you too. How can you describe what a week looks like in your job, and what are some of the main responsibilities and challenges you face?
Can I use the contradicting answer of it depends?
You can, but you have to elaborate.
Yeah. So that's one thing I love about this job is that each week is completely different than the last. I mean, each day can be completely different. Um, you have certain things that you need to do to get to a certain deadline, but outside of that, you can kind of control. At least in my experience, you can kind of control what you work on each day. Whether you're a brand new airman all the way up to as a tech as I am now, you kind of spread out your work as you see during the week to accomplish these deadlines. And you just random things will come up. You'll get a phone call saying, "Hey, I need this now." Especially on a deployment, someone will pass you and say, "Hey, I got this going on. I need this ASAP." Or the general will come down to your office and just say, "This takes priority." And you will never expect that or anticipate that coming. But you just have to think in the back of your mind that these things could happen. And I'm sure, Matt, you have stories and Nate on your deployments that these have happened. So it's just one thing I love about this job is each week is completely different than the last. And as you said, you'll have meetings, you'll have people coming up to your desk and just distracting you, and it's just completely different every day.
Yeah, absolutely. You say the same thing, Matt?
Uh, so on the outside, I work for a company, a defense contractor company, and you can find out who I work for. Just it's on LinkedIn. It's not a big deal, but yeah, on the outside, it's going to vary. This is my second company I worked for. First company I worked for was for 3 years, and I was doing contract administration, which is basically you're selling things. You're selling your products and services to the end customer. It's a lot different than being in the Air Force where you're buying everything. So a lot of that is, I worked in manufacturing, so it's a very niche field. So largely the first 6 months is learning what these people are talking about. What's EOQ and what's all this stuff, and what are stamp packages, and what does all this stuff mean? I have no idea. So it's lots of meetings. It's lots of relationship building. That's a big thing. That's a very big thing because in these large, long running contracts, the problem you have day one is going to be your problem you have next year. You're going to own it. It's not like in the Air Force where every 3 years you're either moving or you're going to deploy. So you don't really get to follow through and see. But in the contracts and the stuff that I'm working now, I create my own problems or I create my own solutions to those problems. So it's it's very different. Company, publicly traded company. There's incentives based on profit and loss. You've got shareholders to answer to. You've got a multitude of different government compliance and regulations. You've got the SEC with SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX controls. You're always constantly in a movement or a momentum of looking at what are the terms and conditions that you're negotiating with your suppliers or with your end users. It's a lot different. So one day I could be focused on, like Monday could be, okay, I'm going to sit down in 4 hours. I'm going to go through these terms and conditions. And then I'm going to be working through some mods for my subcontractors. It's like Beavers, like you're saying, like no day is the same. And I couldn't say that I could tell you Monday through Friday what I'm going to be doing because, there's different priorities from internal and external customers that you're dealing with. So it just depends, really. I hate to say that too, but it depends. But you've got a full plate.
Yeah, I think that
Yep.
paints a good picture. But to circle back to Beavers, what would you say are your main responsibilities and challenges you face?
Main responsibilities is getting your mission partners what they need timely. So you do have timelines you have to meet when they give you what we call a requirements package. It's a document that says this is what our unit needs. Please contract it for us. And depending on the complexity and dollar value of it depends on how long you have to get this contract in place. So that would be your main responsibility is getting your mission partner what they need on a timely basis. The challenge comes with working with the mission partner on explaining exactly what they need, because that can be confusing because they'll say, "Oh, I need a desk." Okay, there's millions of different desks in the world. Just getting it down to a fine point. There's the issues with finding a contractor that could do it. There's a lot of challenges that you have to overcome throughout the contracting process, and it depends on what you're trying to get. So it's really different.
Yeah, it is interesting how contracting gets a bad rap for, the lowest bidder and the different jokes and whatnot. But some of those purchase
Yeah,
requests, one of my favorites said projector. I'm like, I can go to wish.com and get like a $10 projector, or we can go
right.
150
Yeah.
inches, 4K. I don't even know if 4K was out at the time. I guess 1080p. I mean, $10,000 projector to $10 projector, but no direction. It's kind of funny.
But if you like problem solving, then contracting is the job for you, though. You'll have,
Yeah.
if you have good problem solving skills and like challenges, then it's very entertaining and fun.
So, Matt, I got a question for you. Now that you've gone on the other side, I'd like to kind of hear a little bit about that because, I mean, we do have a lot of jokes about the acquisition process being slow and burdensome and caught up with red tape. So, is that the same on the outside? And if you could fix it, if there is a way to fix it, how would you fix it?
It, it's different for sure. I'll say that um, the the government has more internal restrictions than I would say we do on the outside as a government contractor. Um, our challenge that we face is that we are responding a lot of times to customer suspenses, and customers on the outside can be either a prime contractor, government, U.S. government customer, and they have their deadlines that we have to try and meet. So our process, we still have approval processes that we have to go through, but it's faster because we don't have the ability to sit there and say, oh well, we're just going to turn this in late. No, that's, you can't turn it in late because you're missing, if like the contracting officer, like they Beaver says, hey, this is due Friday at 4, we can't be late and turn it in at Friday at 4:01. It's not going to fly. That's lost business right there. So there's teams of people working these requirements internally to make sure we meet those suspenses or ahead of those suspenses. Still going through an approval process. We still have to get all different approvals from different signature authorities, but I would say that that is a one big change. We're more motivated, I would say, internally sometimes than it seemed like it was when I was back in the government.
Which I
And
guess makes sense, right? Not for profit business. You're not trying to make money, you're just trying to cut even.
yeah, yeah,
So if you could change
yeah.
something about Air Force contracting, what would you change?
Uh,
Or is it
from
not
what I
possible?
remember, I would say I would change it in the sense of urgency, right? Not necessarily, and that doesn't mean saying removing the different reviewers and approval processes. I would say, making it so that when you do hit certain dollar thresholds and you have to go to certain levels for different approvals, I would say that you would track that and you would make that each person has so much time to turn it around to get so that you can get that requirement out on the out posted out on I think it's moved to sam.gov now. I think everything's consolidated.
Yep.
That would help you guys with your internal mission partners meet the deadlines that they need.
Awesome. Okay. We're going to move on to the next question. So I'd like you to think of one thing. What is one thing you'd like to highlight about this career field?
I love that I get to see what a bunch of different career fields do and meet a lot of different people. I try and get out of my office all the time to meet different people, go to the squadrons and the units I'm getting stuff for, find out about their mission, see how I'm affecting it. Whereas other career fields, they don't get to see anything outside of what they're doing. Whereas I support the entire base, and I get to get some insight into how the Air Force operates and the mission and how that's accomplished. So I'm just meeting a ton of different people that you wouldn't normally get to in different career fields.
Awesome. Matt, what do you think?
I think being out is, like you talked about different, you're dealing with the base and all the supplies, but when you get out, it's a whole wide world, and it's kind of like you can almost pick what you want to do if you decide to go industry. I never thought I'd be working on manufacturing PAC-3 and PAC-2 missile parts in my first job, and now I'm working on projects that never in my life I would have ever thought that I'd actually be a part of certain um, programs that I shouldn't necessarily name, but yeah, some of our mission partners are like NASA and all that, and NASA and the Army and the Air Force, and some of the stuff these guys are doing is just it's just unbelievable. It's just mind blowing, and you're just realizing you're sitting there. I'm reading these requirements, and I'm just going like, man, I'm on the ground floor of stuff that's going to be taking us further into space. Like, and it's just like I never thought 13, 14 years ago I'd ever be a part of any of this stuff, and here it is today, and I'm just like, wow, I'm so lucky.
And I think that's a really good thing to remember. There's people that feel like, they don't like their job and whatnot. So getting out is really important. I'm glad that the two commanders we had there at Travis were both really supportive of that. And one story I'll share real quick. I remember I'd crossed over, I was air traffic, I was on the flight line, I was in the ops group, and then I moved over. And I was really excited at first as my bonus dad was contracting, which that's kind of a story in itself. I made fun of him for being a paper pusher because my friends as a kid would always ask me, what does your dad fly? What does your dad fly? And I'm like, oh, I was always disgruntled because I'm like, he doesn't fly. He just sits in a cubicle. And so then I come up on retraining and I have it on my list and I'm like, oh, I won't get it. And I got it. So I had to call him and he's just laughing because the universe, comes back and gives me the thing I used to make fun of. But yeah, so I was excited at first. And then after the first year, some of the people in the office are like, oh, we just fly a mouse. All we do is cut paperwork. And, once you hear it kind of more and more, it kind of sinks in. And so I remember, towards the end of the first year, or whatever the time frame was, I was like, yeah, I guess I just like kind of push paper. I wasn't getting out and seeing the end products and the users and things like that. And Paisley got sick, and she was sick with something. Her fever was running, and it just didn't seem like it was going very well. And the temperature was rising and whatnot. So we flew in. We got her into David Grant, and she got her hooked up with this machine. And the machine like told the nurse, enough information for her to tell us kind of what was going on. And so you got all this stress and anxiety, and you're kind of freaking out. But based on what the nurse gave from the machine, it's like, oh, it's this, we can antibiotics, work on this, and you guys will be out of here soon and get you taken care of. And so the stress and anxiety and all these things are going on are relieved in an instant because of this machine. Come to find out, I bought the machine earlier in the
I was going
year.
to say you bought the machine.
Yeah.
So it's just like this big wave of emotion that hits you. And so I remember, trying to share that story with the people that were like, oh, that's all we do. Just try to get out and really see those things. I had a purchase request for pig pens. I was like, why am I buying pig pens? And, there's animal testing facility at Travis, and they were feeding pigs energy drinks to see what would happen to their hearts, and just, crazy things that, to Matt's point, like you never thought you'd be involved and whatnot. But I think some of these career fields that people feel like they're not doing well or whatever, I know we talk about the gear and the machine and how important, but getting out and getting to your end user, I think even if you're maintenance or, security forces or whatever it may be, seeing the end user is a super important. So I'm glad you guys brought that up. You never know what you can get into.
Yeah, I stress that to my junior airmen all the time. I'm like, get out of your desk, go visit these people that are that are speaking to you. My 7-year-old daughter thinks I work on a computer all day, which yeah, I am, but also at the same time, I'm interacting with all these people. I just deployed to Kosovo and worked with NATO out there and got to interact with 29 different nations of people that I would normally do if I just sat at my desk all day. You would not talk to these people and get to know them and everything. That's the joy of this job, is just to meet all these people, but you have to put out that effort. And I'm sure in every other career field is the same. If you just get out and talk to people to see what impact you really have on the mission and everything. And I'm sure on the outside, it's probably the same, Matt. If you talk to people by like, oh, this is what you're actually doing and accomplishing.
So what
Yeah,
would you
it
say?
is.
Oh, sorry.
No, I say, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I think the main difference is I have a lot more internal. There's more of an internal team. So, for example, we have a business management team. So we work closely with business management, program manager. We're the business team that helps the program manager manage the business side of things while they manage the technical. So it's learning who those individuals are and asking all the questions about where the financials at, what's the estimate completion at, where we at invoicing wise, where we at, are we looking at cost or overruns or underruns. So it's learning those different tools, but still going back to that same point. Yeah, you're learning. You have to get out and go and talk to those individuals.
What would you say is the most bizarre buy?
I don't think I can say it first.
That's funny. I was going to preface like that you can actually say out loud and
Yeah, it
have
was
it
my first
published.
purchase. I thought it was a joke, but
Was it an
I
medical
implant
was
for
device.
David Grant?
Yep, it was a medical device for
Oh,
David Grant. Yeah,
yep,
I
yep.
thought it was a
I
joke.
remember having to Google. I was like, my computer's going to get shut down. Like, I just, hey, no, it's okay. It's market research. I swear it's market research. Trent,
so
what's yours?
I was deployed to Saudi Arabia in 2020, setting up a bear base from scratch, and we literally had no prefabricated buildings. We had cash payments, we had tents and everything, and we got a purchase request for a popcorn machine from someone out there. And come to find out, it was authorized because it was from the chaplain trying to boost the morale up of people with no internet and living in the desert. And we bought this $500 automated popcorn machine out in the middle of the desert. So that
There
was
you
kind of
go.
fun.
Underneath pizza parties is popcorn. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so I want to roll over. We talked about some awesome opportunities and why it's important. What are some of the aspects of the job that are less desirable? Got to give the full package here. Trent just wants to say
Hours.
it's
Yeah.
rosy.
Yeah.
I'll come out and say on the outside, even be on the inside as you rise up when you start off as a CA, contract administrator. It's going to be a little different when you switch and become a contracting officer, and your hours are going to be a little bit longer. The end of fiscal year is kind of on you now because you're the one with the signature authority. On the outside, it's going to be proposals are going to be kind of your nightmare because, like I said, if the Air Force or the government user says we need this by Friday at 4 p.m., you might be working Thursday until like 11 o'clock to get that in because we got to meet those deadlines. It's going to be hours. So and it's going to lull. There's going to be peaks and valleys, if you will. There's going to be times when you're sitting there going like, I got nothing to do. Well, it's going to even out. Trust me.
Savor the downtime.
Mm-hmm.
You got anything else, Beavers?
Yeah, I would say if you're one that likes high physical activity and things like that, this isn't the job for you because you'll be at your desk a lot of the times during the day looking at a computer screen. You'll be reading a lot sometimes. I would say the working with the civilian military dynamic is sometimes issues. Um, you can't control the people you work with, so you're just gonna have to to do it. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Matt kind of hit on the head. There are lulls, peaks, and valleys. You'll be heavily busy in September. Um, Depends on what kind of, if you're in construction, services, commodities, the three different type of contracts you'll be doing. Um, High deployment tempo. So if you're with a family and you're not expecting to deploy, you probably will in contracting in 2 to 3 years at a time. Um, Very competitive. People are smart in contracting. So if you're trying to we have strats now to get promoted. They're bonus points towards your tests. And if you're trying to compete with those, you're going to have heavy competition because we have a lot of smart people in the career field. So you'll need to be volunteering. You'll need to be on your A game a lot if you want one of those spots. Um, yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
I got a question for
I,
you, Beavers. So when I left, we had like LGCA and the different office symbols, and I walked into the one at Kadena, and they had like PK or something. I was like completely
Yeah,
thrown
it's
off. What are the different?
yeah.
Is that just what it morphed into?
PKA, PKB. PK is procurement. It used to
So
be
the
so the L. I'm trying to think of them because that was what I was at. What did you just say? The LGC.
LGCA, was that what it
So it
was?
was
A, B, and C?
logistics, and they changed it to procurement.
Oh, so they're
Yeah.
all PK now.
Yep. Every flight's
Oh,
PK. Yep.
okay, interesting. Okay, I want to touch
hey,
on. Oh, sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
hey, I didn't want to take over your podcast, but I do have a question for the both of you.
Yeah.
When I was leaving, getting ready to retire in 2020, what I started noticing was there was an influx of airmen, and I started noticing a lot more NCOs and people coming into the Air Force. It's not just career field specific, but they had associate degrees or they had bachelor's degrees. Are you guys seeing that the airmen of today are coming in and they have more education than, say, when I came in about 2000?
I can only go off of my recent squadrons, and I would say no. So they flooded contracting tech school with a ton of new airmen in the last 5 years because people were cross training into contracting, staying for 2 or 3 years, getting their certifications, and then bouncing. So now you can only cross train into contracting if you're a staff or below. They stopped cross trainees for techs and above. So they've flooded tech school with airmen, and I've had junior airmen 18, 19 years old with no uh, university college credits at all.
Are they trying to get after their CCF and things like that after they clear their CDCs, or are you seeing the same kind of mentality as before?
I'd say the same mentality. You have some high speed airmen that get after it, some don't. So yeah,
I think that's what I would say too. I think it's really up into the individual. I think it feels like it as a whole, like as United States or whatever, it feels like almost like your bachelor's level degree is almost like your high school diploma now, is what it feels like. It feels like your master's is now like your first step into college. So I think that feels like as like the nation, but as having flights of my flight at Kadena was like 98 people. Obviously, that's mixed contractor, civilian, and whatnot. So probably 40 to 50 actual airmen, big A. But you do have the ones that want to get after it and they're getting that school, and then the ones that came in to get out of home or get out of that area and try to make a better life and things like that, and they don't necessarily have a strong desire to start school. So I'd say it's about the same. I think it's really up to the individual. It does feel, I feel like we're smarter as a whole. I know that doesn't play directly into education, but it does feel like we're better about personal development, I would say. We're
yeah,
working on ourselves a lot more. I think
for
since
sure.
COVID, since we were able to do stuff on the computer and, people are getting more certs. I think certs is probably higher. I don't have any like percentages to back that up, but I see a lot of PMPs out, and a lot of different things where people are getting, things that are worth, they say tens of thousands of dollars on the outside. So
Just curious.
yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. Yeah, we're here for conversation. So I wanted to touch a little bit on the unique opportunities. You guys have kind of touched on deployments and things like that, but I wanted to kind of hear from you guys on the specific things that are in this career field and not others. So I guess that'd be like your DAU, Defense Acquisition University, and some of those trainings and whatnot. So can you touch on some of the unique opportunities that you'd only get here in 6C?
Yeah, Naval Postgraduate School. When I was leaving, I was starting to started getting class slots for enlisted. I had a conversation with an individual that I'd worked with in Turkey, and he's enlisted and he's in the Naval Postgraduate School and working on his master's degree full time. I was like, hey, awesome on you for taking advantage of that. That's really cool. I'm glad they're opening that up. It sounds like they're starting to, I think Nate, you'd said they're, personal development. They're starting to look at the Air Force contracting workforce, recognizing, yes, it's more academic, it's a little bit more unique. You have enlisted and officers that, are warranted and have the ultimate signature authority on whatever it is that they're procuring. They have the ability to have that tough conversation sometimes with people that outrank them and having to say no, like, hey, we shouldn't do this. That comes with challenges. There are some certs through National Contract Management Association, CPCM, Certified Professional Contract Manager, Certified Federal Contract Manager. I think they just opened another one. I think it's Triple CM. I'm not sure what it stands for. So there's certs that you can get, in conjunction with education. I think those are unique to our career field. Other career fields do have certs. I think maintenance guys, they can get their A&P license. That's a big deal. But, contracting specifically, I think there's a number of them. I think DAU has changed, so I can't really talk to that anymore. I think Beavers, you might be able to explain. I think they came up with a new certification process. I'm not too familiar with it. Really glanced at it. So
Yeah, so as soon as and probably Nate and Matt, when you guys came into contracting, you immediately in the first few months went on a temporary duty location for a month to these contracting courses all over across the United States. So you have these temporary duty courses that you'll take. They now kind of turn that to virtual if possible, but there are temporary duty classes that you'll travel to. But there's tons of Defense Acquisition University courses that you can take time away from work to do. I've always allowed my troops to work on school during the duty day. So if they wanted to do school up to an hour during the duty day and there's nothing pressing, I allow them to do that. And I was allowed to do that as an airman, so I want to pay it back to them that not their career fields can maybe do, like security forces. You're probably not allowed to take an hour off the day to do schoolwork, but ours you're able to. Air Force Cool has a program management certification that a lot of people try and get because that's huge on the outside. So there are some certifications that you can get through the Air Force, but I would say these temporary duty courses that Defense Acquisition University allows are huge. Working on contingency contracting to different layers of contracting, subcontracting, etc. So
That White House gig is pretty sweet.
yeah.
So moving to the next question, this one probably will be more funny than anything, but can you speak to one common misconception or stereotype about your career field and what the reality is?
Yeah, that I'm the guy with the money. No. That's
You're not
finance.
finance.
I do not have the money. I'm not in charge of the money. I'm not in charge of your budget. That is not my job. My job is to get you what you need, but I need to see the money from you. So,
There you go. That's a good one. Man.
I'd say sometimes on the outside we're looked at as the admin part of our duty title or job title is taken as though we are
All
admin.
admin.
Yeah, and no, sometimes we have to politely identify. I am authorized on behalf of our company to sign legal documents that bind our company to an agreement, not set up meetings for you. I
Have you
will
ever been
happily
asked to
help you
like
with that.
notarize something or anything like that?
No, no, there's some people that are, but luckily I haven't had that question yet.
That'd be awesome. I know medical admin, as I am now, I've had a nurse ask me to help her with her statistic homework because she said, I know you're really good in Excel. I was like, thank you. I think that's good. I don't want to help you with your homework, but thanks. Oh, that's funny. Admin gets taken a little too far sometimes. Next question is, what's an important personality trait or strength that you think someone needs in this career field?
Interpersonal
Ooh,
communication is huge.
yeah.
Um, got to be able to learn to talk to different people, whether you like them or not, whether you have the same uh, personality they do, et cetera, et cetera. And then definitely thinking on the fly, being adaptable. Things will change at a moment's notice that you have to to be able to think of a solution for.
I I'd say probably which falls along the lines is integrity, or not integrity, initiative. I'm sorry. Integrity is one, yes, you definitely have to have that, but initiative because there's times when you are going to have to rely on what you're relaying to either an internal or external customer. And you have to have the ability to take the initiative to, if it's something you don't know, you got to either research it or ask somebody that does know, but you got to be the one to take that initiative to go and figure out what the answer is to the question that's being asked. You know, how do you find their solution? And you can't do that without having the initiative. If you see a problem, you know, take the initiative to step up and be able to solve it or come up with a solution to present it to somebody who can solve it or has the authority to solve it, and but you still have to take that first step of taking the initiative and raising your hand and saying, hey, here's what's going on, here's how we handle this, here's what my recommendation is.
That's huge, Matt. Because no one's going to be looking over your shoulder throughout the day. Even as an airman, it's here's your work, go do it. So you have to definitely take that initiative to spend your time wisely. 100% agree.
Awesome. So the last career field question I have, you got 12 years, as you said, Beavers, and 20 years of information and experience. With everything that you know now, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting day one?
That's easy. uh, get your education, get your education, and I'll put a different twist on it, kind of how I explain it. You get your education, get your certifications, and get your if you're going to stay in contract and get your NACMA certs, if you can get a PMP, you're going to put a little bit more icing on that cake. But the reason why I say that is because from the day you get your certifications and your bachelor's or master's degree, everything you say is backed by that bachelor's degree, that master's degree, those two certs. I only say those two certs because I actually have them all up here, right? You guys can't see it, but I do have my CPCM and CFCM, and I have my bachelor's. I'm working on my master's, my MBA right now. But everything you say from the moment you earn those certs, you're backed by that. Like what you say, you're saying it as, hey, I'm educated, I'm certified. You can trust what I'm saying.
Awesome.
I tell brand new lieutenants, brand new airmen this: find a subject matter expert that you trust and respect, and just soak up and pick their brain. And engage yourself into conversations around you and just find a good mentor, because that person has been there before. And learn from them, learn from their mistakes, and just try and soak up as much information as you can from them.
Absolutely.
I,
Don't
I will say
someone else
that,
already lived it.
yeah, I will say, there was that skill you're talking about, um, that was beat into my brain when I came in the career field. And now, years later, you start to you recognize who those individuals are. Like in my current position, I know who to go to. I know who I'm lucky. Our team has people have been in contracting over 20 years in the outside, work for different companies. I know who to go to talk to because I learned those skills early on. I could see who that war dog was. It's like, hey, I've been through all this. Let's bring on these
Yeah.
challenges. But here's how you can work through it. Here's the path that you're going on. Here's how this is going to end up because I did this 5 years ago. You'll start to recognize and see those people that as you start moving along, as you start
Yep.
going through your career field,
Yeah. And
your
if
path.
the person that you're relying on isn't helping you, find someone else. Like, don't settle for someone that's not helping you.
Awesome. Okay. So this podcast is focused on mental fitness. We're always working on ourselves, developing ourselves. So we got to intertwine some of that. So I'd like to hear a tip, trick, or personal story about mental fitness from you two.
I would recommend to all of your listeners out there. There's a book called Peaks and Valleys. It's a very good book. It was written. I gotta look it up. I can't remember names. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Spencer
I can get it in
Johnson.
the. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Spencer
Spencer
Johnson.
Johnson. What's the big takeaway?
Um,
What was hard hitting for you?
the big takeaway is that how you behave when you're in a valley, like a low point in your life, will determine your success when you're at a peak in your life, right?
Hmm.
So if you think about it, the errors that you make when you're at that peak will result in the error, that drive down to when you're in your valley. The good things that you do when you're in a valley will help you rise back up to that peak again. And it also talks about you know, finding the source of your fear, right? The one thing I like to think about when I look at different leaders or listen to them talk or is the ego. The ego is a big driver for fear, right? Ego drives like, well, I gotta have a fancy car, or I gotta have um, the most expensive item X, Y, and Z, or I gotta have this and this. But that's ego driving because it's creating fear, and
Hmm.
that can help drive where you're at on a peak or a valley. So understanding what your fears are, learning how to, when you're in the low time, look at the good in the low time. When you're in the high time, look at the good in the high time, and just learn to enjoy it. And I think it actually came out of a data science podcast. I thought it was interesting that I'm listening to this podcast about analyzing different data sets and the different tools, and that was the book that the individual had recommended. And when I read it, I was like, wow, this is really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to get that in the description if anyone wants to check it out. I think I'll have to put it in my cart. That sounds great. Beavers, what do you got?
Nice. Um, I would say know all the resources and try and find as many resources available to you that you can do or can go to. For the Air Force members, one amazing resource is called the MFLAC. It's at the Military Family Readiness Center. Um, it's non-attribution. It's kind of like someone you can just talk to and vent, because everyone needs to have someone that they can vent to. You can't bottle everything up yourself. You can't do everything yourself. So you need to find different people you can talk to about everything, from the chaplain to the MFLAC to your friend. Just have someone, and give these resources to your troops and your friends as well, to share everything. That would just be my biggest thing. I've know a lot of supervisors and troops that I've had, and myself, that have gone to different various resources, and it's helped tremendously. So just if you do go to these resources, share that you've been to them with people, because that'll give them confidence in going to them if they ever need it. Because a lot of people will look up to you, and if you're like saying, "Hey, I went to this resource, and these are the people, and these are the help that they gave me. You should try them sometime." The chances of them going to those are huge. So I
Do
would
you
just say
think that
pass it on.
do you think the stigma is moving in the right direction with all these conversations we're having?
I think it is. Um, I know people that have gone to these places like mental health, the stigma over mental health, um, and they've come back and shared with the squadron that they've been better off with it. So I I have when I came in, the stigma was mental health. If you go there, your career's done. I haven't heard that in a while. I don't even remember the last time I heard that, compared to when I came in. So I think it is moving in the right direction.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. I lied earlier. I said it was the final question about the AFSC, but I got one final one to close us out. Finally, what do you see as the future of your career field, and what excites you the most about the future? Matt's all the cool missiles that he can't talk about, but
I, I'll say that the future is really going to be, and gosh, I really hate to say this because the data science and all this has become the past 5 years has been the buzzword and everything. But really, the mesh between data, technology, and the tools that are out there, that's going to be the future. It's not necessarily, I had a talk with somebody about AI, and their fear was like, oh, AI is going to replace a contract specialist. I was like, no, no, you're misinterpreting, you're misreading, you're not reading the road right. It's AI will be there to supplement in certain ways, but AI will never be able to replace or read and interpret the legal aspect of the contracting career field. It will be there to assist in certain ways, but you have to understand there's a signature behind that, and it's not going to be AI generated. It's going to be a person that's going to read and interpret and review and approve for signature. Um, there's software out there, a lot of software out there. I could go down a laundry list. Like Beavers, you'd be crying if you knew what some of the stuff is that's out there that's available to us on the defense side. Like storage management, I could put a mod in a system in like maybe 20 minutes and send it out. I can accept the mod on the contract side because I work contracts and subcontracts. I can accept the mod. I can have it in about 5 minutes. Like it's the technology and the creativity of the tech industry is just amazing, and getting to see it up front and being able to use some of those tools is amazing.
it's interesting
From a
where people
military,
say, oh, sorry, I was just going to jump in real quick. It's
go
interesting when
ahead.
people talk about taking over the jobs and whatnot. Like one I've heard is like aircraft pilot, because, with all the advanced features and whatnot, it basically can land and take off itself. But there's just certain things I think you will always have a human up in front. Like I just can't imagine boarding an aircraft and like looking over it and like there's just no one up there. Like even if the thing could do it, you get into what happens in an emergency, making those decisions and things like that. So it's interesting. People get so worked up, we're gonna lose all our jobs. I'm like, I don't think it's gonna happen. But anyway, what's up, Beavers?
From Air Force military perspective, I think it's going to be with some emerging competitors and peers is going to be how we do contracting against them in the same contested environments. If we're trying to compete for the same things from the same markets, how are we going to use our expertise to get ahead of them, or convince these other countries or local markets to supply us and not our competitors or peers? Um, we just saw two active conflicts happening currently at the same time that just popped up in the last year or two. So you don't know when the next one is, when you're going to have to go out to these places that might not have the technological advances or the software, or where the cyber warfare is happening that is going to obstruct these technologies and cyber systems where you might have to do paper and on the ground conversations to get what we need. So the next 10 years is going to be very interesting, I think, with some of these peers rising up. So,
Yeah, it sounds like from the military side, yeah, you are, because you guys are, there's a lot going on, especially in the defense industry, with support for those efforts. The larger government customers are using things like OTAs and other contract vehicles that don't necessarily come with a lot of the FAR clauses and restrictions that you guys are using, but it allows those larger customers, it gives them the ability to turn around and place with a big defense contractor a very quick contract vehicle and give them funding very quickly. And you on your side, at the base level, you're going to be competing with that. Like, what do you do when one of the big defense contractors has bought out all the resources in a location? What do you do? You're going to be facing, it's ultimately a logistic, right? How do you get those supplies that your customers are requiring? Do you go to Amazon? Do you try and go to GSA? Like, what vehicle is there in place that you can use to get those requirements to the end users? And I think largely it sounds like it's going to be a logistic problem for in the next coming years. Like you said, I think you said about next 10 years. That sounds about right.
It's interesting too, because we saw a lot of that with COVID too. I mean, sometimes there's just not any more in the world. And so sometimes people, spend more money, pay them more, or, get it here faster. It's like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't matter how much you pay or whatnot. So that'll definitely be interesting with the finite resources.
Yeah. And going along, that's another good point, Nate, is like, we saw that on the manufacturing side, we saw that as precious metals and different types of metal started becoming scarce because of the supply chain problems. And then the second problem is that our government customer is always wanting to reduce our price. But how do you reduce your price when the cost of your materials has skyrocketed? Like, lumber at one point had increased 400% of what it used to be. 400, like, that's unprecedented. You can look on the chart of lumber prices. If you get really bored at night and you want to do really nerdy stuff, go look at lumber prices. But you could track it and you could see where it just spiked, and you're just like, this is insane. But when you have supply chain shortages and your customers asking you to still reduce your pricing, but all of your suppliers are increasing all their pricing, and those are still challenges we're facing today. And the conflicts over in like Ukraine and stuff, that affects a lot of these supply chain challenges we see on the industry side. And I think, Beaver, like you said, next 10 years is going to present different challenges in different areas.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I'll try to summarize some of the main points we talked about. Being able to get some of the certification, some great opportunities for deployments, getting out, traveling, a lot of opportunities for education. Some of the downsides being some extended hours, but we talked kind of about the uphill and downhill, or the peaks and valleys. You might be able to catch up on some school at some point, and other times, trying to bust out that 12-hour shift. So a lot of different things, but some great opportunities out there. Encourage all the listeners out there, share their thoughts. Let me know what's going good, what's going bad, and what I can work on. I'd like to thank both of you. Thank you, Beavers and Matt, for coming out.
Of course, best job I ever had.
If you want to know more, Beavers is a internal recruiter, so find him in the gal and shoot him some emails. But I'd like to thank everyone for listening to AFSC's 1 through 9 today. Remember, exploring different career fields is an important step in finding the right path for you. Join us next time as we continue to explore different career paths and the opportunities they offer. If you have any questions or want to share your own career story, please let me know. I love you all. See ya.